In our social media-led world that's overflowing with reels, tweets, TikTok videos, newsletters, posts, it's hard to imagine someone being considered iconic and influential and celebrated for over 5 decades and counting. Especially if you started way before all these decades came into existence. I'm delighted to welcome on Media Dialogues today best-selling writer of both fiction and non-fiction, columnist, former magazine editor, model, and full-time bon vivant with an incredible and voracious appetite for life. Little wonder her latest book, a memoir, is called Insatiable. Ladies and gentlemen, Shobha Day. Shobha, it's lovely to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you very much. Great pleasure. I'm looking forward to it greatly. I'm sure we'll have a great conversation as we have in the past.
What do you make of that introduction? Do you think, because I know you hear very carefully and react to everything. So do you think you're the original influencer, the original creator?
I like the idea of being an OG, no matter in which sphere. So I don't really categorize myself as either an influencer or any of that. It's just good to feel yourself and good to know that you've been able to be yourself and do exactly what you want on your own terms for 50 years and counting. And to be in a public space where almost uninterrupted as a professional writer.
No, and your columns, Shobha, I think being in the column, being mentioned, being dissed, whatever it is that you decided to do with people or on issues, did make a difference to what people saw and made of events, isn't it?
I'm sure, but that was never a concern for me. It wasn't a preoccupation. I wasn't writing to get those reactions. I was writing what I wanted to. And I've been very lucky that I've been able to do that without any constraints. Of course, the environment today being what it is, it's significantly different. But for 5 decades, I've had a free run. And that in itself, I think, is a great feeling. I haven't missed a single deadline. I haven't skipped a single column, and I've just been at it and enjoying every minute. It's not like I look at it as something that's now just a professional obligation that I have to get to my laptop and start hammering out a column. It's not about that at all. It's about the excitement that each column, each book, each comment, each tweet, each Insta post, I'm still like a kid, getting a kick out of it.
What do you make of this creator economy, all these young people from different parts of India, from the boondocks even, suddenly coming to prominence, either because of sharing their authentic selves, some outlandish talent, unique trait?
I like it. I think it's very democratic. For me, it would be oppressive at this point to do it. I don't even think it attracts me enough to put myself out there every 3 seconds and either tweet or put up a reel. It's a lot of work. So I admire the people who actually do it. I admire the people who are creating content by the microsecond, as it were. I admire someone like an Urfi Javed, for example. She has created a persona in a manner that has broken a lot of rules. And I like the fact that she can take what comes with the turf without ever actually degrading herself. I don't find her doing anything offensive. I find her appearances, I actually look out for it every morning. What is Urfi going to be not wearing today? So she's made a brand name out of something, using her creativity, using her personality, using her physical assets. What's wrong with that? I don't see anything at all that people go on and on about arresting her. Arresting her for what? She's not breaking any law. There are lots of people out there, talent that just keeps sort of bubbling up like almost volcanic. The creativity eruptions. I love it. These are people who would never ever have had a shot at doing anything with their own lives, their own personality. They didn't have the advantages that I did. They didn't have your advantages. They're doing it like self-made, self-created celebrities. I love it. I love the idea how equal all these platforms have made everybody.
Do you wish you had these aids when you started?
Not at all. I enjoyed doing it my way, and perhaps it was a tough and hard way. But it's also difficult to speculate, right? It's a hypothesis. How would it have been had I had these all these tools
Because
and
you're
aids.
using, you slid into them very organically, isn't it?
I did.
What was it? I checked before we did this. 137,000 followers on Instagram, 2.5 million on Twitter.
Yes.
So you're making the most of these aids now, isn't it?
Yes, but
Do you find yourself communicating differently, thinking of different things to say, or different ways in which to say things?
I think it's important not to be obsessed with numbers in any case. It's important not to keep checking your likes and your followers. You just have to be your authentic self. And if people are interested in that self, I guess they'll sign up. And if they're not, what does it matter? I mean, I'm not going to be getting any prizes and awards at the end of it all. And neither am I looking to commercialize. So I'm not looking at brand endorsements because of a certain X number of likes and followers. For me, it's about self-expression, and it's unfiltered, and it's not calculated. There's no motivation to do it other than the fun of doing it. And if you're really not on social media platforms, you're living under a rock. And as someone who chronicles today and today's times, I cannot afford the luxury of living under a rock. Neither do I want to.
Talking about having fun and talking about being yourself, the memoir,
Yes.
Insatiable, what a fabulous title. It sort of kind of gets your appetite for life, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes,
For the
it
next
does.
best thing, the next big thing.
Well, it was lovely. I liked the way the title came to me, because the working title for the book initially was Searching for Anuradha, which is my given birth name. And
Which I didn't know, and I literally fell off when I read it, started reading the book.
yes, so we must discuss a bit about what Anuradha, the connotations of that nakshatra.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a fragile nakshatra, by the way.
Oh.
And 17th in the order.
Yeah, that I knew.
Yeah,
That I knew.
so fragile, but one capable of giving a lot of abundance, whatever that means, but it sounds good. So the book started off really as a personal quest, and it just wasn't working enough for me and also for my agent, Kanishka Gupta, who kept saying, but ma'am, it's great, it's fine, it's very philosophical, it's deep. Is that really the title of the book? Because the mood of the book is quite different. So Insatiable, like most things, came to me like that. You cannot explain how these things come to you for any writer, for any creative person.
So you need to do a little explanation for people who haven't read the book yet, which is why you were called Anuradha, because, you know, when I read it, I'm like, Shobha Day. That name is iconic. The acute E, you know, like the French accent on the day, all of that, you know, the Shobha with the double A. So we've seen all of these, and the name is very familiar to most people, right? And here you are saying that you were not happy with your given name, and you actually preferred a name that your parents had thought of, which is Anuradha, which I'm quite thrilled by the way, to know that.
They hadn't just thought of it, they had named me that. You know, we have the traditional naming ceremony, the Barsa as we call it in Marathi. So it was my given name. And then an uncle decided that it would be way too long, later when I grew up, to be signing off as Anuradha Rajadyaksha. So he was, perhaps he was right in the length of the entire name. But my older sister is Mandakini, and she didn't shorten it to anything else, and she still signs off as Mandakini Tata, of course, a married name. But she was Mandakini Rajadyaksha through college and school and her working years, and no one seemed to think it too long.
What does it mean when you suggest that you still have this hankering for this name your parents had given you? There is a metaphorical thing here, isn't it? Or is it actually literally just never being happy with, you know, what you are named?
Never been happy with Shobha because it just was so banal. It was just so common. It was so uninspiring, so non-classical, so non-poetic. It was the name of that generation of young women born in India. Like Priyanka became the popular name, and then Natasha and Ariana and
Aryan
Aisha,
for boys.
Aryan and all of it. So I had 6 Shobhas in my class growing up. So it wasn't fun to be Shobha number 6 or Shobha number 7. The last one actually, or the last one because of the Rajadaksha. Yeah, so to be known by a number rather than a name, and a name that I really did find without any emotional resonance. I connected to Anuradha, I still do. There is something about it which is I like classical names. So all my children are named
Yeah.
with classical, old-fashioned names, which they may not like, but I liked. Shobha was just too ordinary, I guess.
But have you made your peace with it now?
Not really. Shobha Day is now like a brand.
Yeah.
I see it like it's, I step out of myself, and of course I relate to it. Of course I'm proud of it. Of course I know the power of the brand. Of course I know that you calling it iconic, not me. But yes, the accent was necessary because especially when we were traveling, I would always be asked, de what? It's
Yeah.
Shobha de something.
Right.
So the French accent came
Yeah.
on after that because it just made it easier for people when we're traveling to pronounce the name. And in my husband's family, his grandfather dropped the Y. So they were DEY days, the Bengali DEY days. And he grew up with a DE, and so was his father a DE. So is all our family members, they're all DE, not DEY. I have no problem with it. I like the way it looks. I like how it sounds, but I still feel Anuradha from within.
Okay, so I should be happy with the name I've
you
been,
should
that
love
you
it and be so
hankered
proud
for.
of it.
Okay. Thanks to my parents then. You said something which I find interesting, which is that you cannot afford not to know what's going on, to know what's out there. And even in the book, you talk about how you want to know what the next big thing is.
Yes.
This is that insatiability, isn't it? And this
Absolutely.
is linked to an appetite for life. You want to
Yes.
just give us what drives this?
I like the word bhook in Hindi. Bhook is something so primary. It's so basic. We all have our bhooks, right? It's not just about food. People can be hungry for recognition, for fame, for achievements, for so many other things in life. The targets they set for themselves. Hungry for love, hungry for attention. And all these hungers combined are a part of the book. So it's not about food. It's about a certain insatiable curiosity about life. It's about an insatiable desire to experience life, to be adventurous about so many things, travel, for example, new foods, new music, new tastes, new cinema. I have that. I think perhaps I got that from my father. He was equally curious at 98. He was still asking me questions about, say, Madonna and her new release, or something he'd just read which had nothing to do with him as a bureaucrat and in the Ministry of Law, conservative Maharashtrian gentleman of a certain vintage. But till his dying day, he wanted to know more. So I get it from him. I want to know everything. Of course, it's not possible to know everything, but I still would ask questions. I have no ego at all. If I don't know something, I am candid enough to say, I'm sorry, I don't know, tell me about it.
So how unusual is this for someone who is, and I am going to say it because it is out there, we all know, it's a well-documented life, for someone who's 75 years old?
75 is a nice number. Even visually, I like the way it looks. And age is not something that I will romanticize or say, oh my God, it feels incredible to be 75, I can't wait to be 80. That would be an outright lie. 75 comes with its own baggage, its own vulnerabilities, its own reality checks. So there's no getting away from any of that. But it's also an important landmark when we look at our past, when we look at what the mortality rate used to be for women, what it was in my mother's generation, my grandmother's generation. So I do feel great to be alive and kicking at 75, and that I still have a few years to look forward to of travel and dancing and music and fun and
but this
all of
outlook,
it.
this outlook of curiosity, of wanting to be in the moment, of being in the now, how unusual is this for your peers, for your age cohort, if I'm going to use marketing kind of terms? Or is it unique to you, or do you think it's actually something that is pretty common now, that people do want to live fully and optimally, as you know, and in the moment?
I think you said it, and it's a segment, a market segment that has been neglected and ignored, because women of my age, men of my age, who are in reasonable good health, we have the resources, we have the sense of adventure to try new products, to try new experiences, and that we are marginalized to being sort of semi-invisible creatures.
You feel that way?
A large segment of our society is treated with that kind of patronizing, you benign kind of tolerance. And ideally, they'd like all old people to be invisible, or at least that something that you shut up and put up kind of a thing. But we are there, we are vibrant, we are contributing to the economy in many ways. My husband at 83 is a working professional, and so am I. And I know a lot of women like myself in their 70s who are actively engaged with society in so many different ways and contributing to it and earning and have the money to invest, for example. And that we should be assigned a role which is out of sync with today. We are living longer, we are living better. So why not acknowledge that and not, I don't want to be relegated to a harmless little old lady, a little granny sitting there knitting booties for my grandchildren. I mean, I love them, but that's not my primary role in life, to be a nanny to my grandkids.
Besides the things that we've already spoken about, there's something else that I find interesting in the book, and that is you seem to articulate a sort of insecurity about who you are as a writer even. Yeah, so you're at Lit Fest, but there are these writers who seem to intimidate you. You want to sound like Ramchandra Guha, but end up sounding like Gangubai Kathia, Gangubai. So what is this insecurity? Because I thought it would not be a problem if you're a bestseller, and both in fiction and non-fiction. What are you craving for?
It's not about that kind of insecurity. It's not about numbers and recognition or any of that.
Respect.
I like the idea. Insecurity keeps a writer going. I find a lot of writers, far younger writers too, are self-absorbed, self-obsessed, narcissistic, conceited, and that sort of stifles your creativity. You should always be a little afraid and very insecure, because that keeps you on your toes. So yes, the mantle of genius that a lot of people walk around with, I find that on the one hand very amusing, and I look at them strutting around at Lit Fest, and when they come on stage, it's like they're about to change the world, and I feel like saying, excuse me, yours is one book in a world full of books. It's not that you've invented penicillin or something, you know, it's not a vaccine for COVID that's going to save millions of people. You've just written a book, and that book may or may not travel well, may not maybe outlive you. You have done something, run with it, be proud of it, but don't walk about like you're a demigod or a demigoddess. I find conceit extremely unattractive. Huh?
Who are these writers?
Who are these writers? I'm not going to name them. They know who they are, I'm sure. But it's a kind of, it's a breed. Let's put it that way. They're not, I don't want to handpick any. It's a breed of writers across the world, and they're given the kind of importance which is, I think, exaggerated. Because it's not that they're out there fighting a war.
Haven't you been one of them?
Never. Never. My sense of, my perspective, I always have a grip on myself. Thank God for that. It's so easy to be swept away. It's so easy to be told. Of course, it's hugely flattering if an Amitav Ghosh calls you a national treasure. It is usually flattering, but if I were to believe every word of what I read, even the most gushing prose, I think I'll be doomed as an individual, forget as a writer. And I'll be so distracted by being on that kind of a high. So I just think we all writers need a reality check.
So
that's about it.
What's your reality check? How do you stay grounded?
I think my children keep me grounded because they barely read my books, and I have to beg of them to read my columns. And when their friends talk about liking something they've read, that's when they may actually turn to the column and say, oh yeah, not bad, not bad, not too bad.
How do they react to the fact that they appear in your books and that you talk about them, and you reveal things about them which they may or may not care for? You
can't ever win with family. And that's the downside.
Has that been an issue?
No,
Never.
Not for me. If it's been for them, well, they have to deal with it. Because there's also the upside of being my children. So if there is a bit of a downside to it, and nothing that I ever reveal about them, I think is that terrible and that personal. And it's quite sensitively tackled.
Whose approval do you seek the most today? Whose approval would make you feel good about what you're doing?
I would think my husband's and my children's. In the old days when my father was alive, certainly his. Other than that, no. But my husband tends to be prejudiced in my favor. And
lucky you.
Yes. So, but though he is very exacting when it comes to analyzing a book or a column, and if he doesn't like it, he's not going to stop himself from saying it, and does. With my children, there are absolutely zero filters. So when they pay me a compliment, I know where it's coming from. And it's very sincere. There are no strings attached. To impress them is a tough act. To get their approval, oh my God, yes, I crave it.
You mentioned COVID in the passing, and I know you've dealt with that experience in another book, in some of your Instagram posts during that time of the lockdown. But what did those 2 years mean? Because I want to get to what COVID brought front and center, and that is our mortality, isn't it? And we've all lost people we know.
Yes.
What did that do to you? What was that experience like? And did it bring your own mortality up close? And how are you processing that?
Those 2 years were tough. I think they were tough for every single one of us, no matter what we may say. We are lucky that we survived COVID, and that should be our biggest and more deepest sense of gratitude that we are here to tell the tale. But to say that it was a breeze, oh no, it wasn't, not for anyone. I think COVID irrevocably changed us all in many ways.
How did it change you?
To me, it was a time for reflection of a very different sort. Some of it is reflected in that book, because vulnerability, especially for someone who has been perhaps projected for the right reasons, the wrong reasons, as a don't mess with me, I'm tough, I can take on anything and anyone. Most of it is accurate and true, because that indeed is a strong aspect of my personality. But there is the other, which I had denied myself. I had denied myself tears and crying for the longest time, thinking of it as a sign of weakness. And COVID made me extremely vulnerable, because I was constantly thinking not of myself, I was thinking of the family, my grandchildren, my children, my extended family, certainly my husband and myself. It wasn't my own mortality that I feared, not for a moment, not for a moment. But it was about losing precious people in my life around me, and I did. Not my immediate family, but certainly friends, and certainly parents of close friends. And that kind of shook me up. It shook up the whole world, because there were so many things that there was no closure to, right, in our lives. And this made you feel somewhat, in a panic-stricken way, a sense of urgency, that there's so much I've left unsaid. There are so many people whom I should have reached out to, expressed myself to, expressed my feelings about. I haven't done that. There were unresolved many, many issues that confronted you during those 2 years. And I'm glad that I didn't run away from any of it.
When you look at the world around you and you see Russia going into invade Ukraine, and it's over a year and more that the world has experienced war after COVID and the lockdown, it just seems like nothing changes, where people's memories are really short, isn't it?
Nothing.
How do you feel about the human race? Do you feel optimistic? Do you feel a bit cynical? How do you feel?
There's no place for cynicism for a creative person, and especially for a writer. You cannot afford to be jaded and negative. So optimism is a quality and a trait I identify in other people, positivity, and have always been deeply attracted to. About the human race, well, COVID was the first time in the history of mankind, womankind, humankind, that we were all together and equal, flattened by a virus. It has never happened, not during the wars, not any other crises. So the crisis point made us all aware of just how we could be gone just like that. So wars are not going to change. Public policy is not going to change. Politics around the world, global economies are not going to change because of what we have experienced. This is a part of the beast that is called human nature. There'll always be a fight over oil. There'll always be a fight over territory. There'll always be a fight over identity. There'll always be religious rifts and fights. To think that COVID has made us all wiser somehow, I don't think that has happened, but that we will stop and think as we have during this conflict and given it some perspective, and the world has come together. It is polarized and it is what it is. And
how have you come to terms with the fact that it is so polarized in India over the past few years? Because you're a forthright person.
Yes.
You're an opinionated person. What are your coping mechanisms for the current scenario in which you find yourself?
Well, I always tell myself, and there's the optimist in me, that after a low tide, which is like now, there'll always be a high tide. And we should look forward to a future which is significantly different from what we are passing through in our social history in particular right now. And I also deeply believe that love always but always triumphs over divisiveness and hate. And any attempt to manipulate us as a nation, as diverse as we are, as opinionated as we are, as difficult and argumentative as we are, the idea of India and our constitution is far bigger than any political party and any charismatic leader, no matter how charismatic that leader may believe himself or herself to be. So India is always bigger than an individual, and that keeps me going.
That keeps you going, Shobha De. One final question, and that is, what are you listening to? Who are you reading? Who are you excited by in the movie world? Because pop culture is really, you're watching that you're watching that space very carefully, aren't you?
Yes. So I like Coke Studio the most because the most creative music seems to come from Coke Studio. Last year was full of Pasuri, so I'm looking forward to the next tune. I'm looking forward to getting hooked onto a tune called Chaudhary, which is amazing. I've talked about Jalebi Baby in the book as well. So these are things which catch on. You can't explain it. It's something so natural. It's very organic. Why the whole world suddenly starts listening to a certain tune. Movies-wise, I really am focusing on regional cinema, and I have watched Pathaan. And I have my views on that, not the popular view, but my own.
Well, this is one thing on which we disagree.
Yeah, we do. Being a Shah Rukh Khan supporter and admirer on many levels, but it was still not, according to me, Shah Rukh at his glorious best. And maybe I over-expected something. After 4 years of being away, I wanted more Shah Rukh, if I can say that. Then that's already a compliment.
Well, my views are diametrically opposite. I thought Pathaan was absolutely heady because of Shah Rukh's charm, and I felt it was almost like rediscovering him, like the way you discovered him in Fauji for the first time. You said, who is this guy? Oh my God. Anyway, but that's all right. The important point is, I think that we both went and saw it.
Yes, of course. Along with millions and millions of other fans.
People, yes. Shobha, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
and
Anuradha.
We'll do another conversation, I'm sure, when the next book is out or the next exciting project you're on is. Thank you.
Let's wait for that. Thank you so much.
All the best. Thank you very much for watching. Catch Media Dialogues again next week. See you then.